Okay, Brian, tell us about that very first day of Bake from Scratch. There was a monumental road trip.
For a few months before the road trip, I had been toying around with this idea or this feeling that the world was missing a media brand just for people that love to bake, or at least here in the US, I should say, because in other countries in Europe, there have always been baking and pastry specific magazines. And I kept thinking, why isn't there anything for people that love baking? And then I thought, why is Hoffman Media not the company doing this? I'm the passionate baker. I can put together a magazine brand. And I think for me, that was the aha moment of understanding how my mom had started our company and thus all these other brands, and realizing it was my moment or my opportunity,
Right.
not my moment, my opportunity to do that. So you and I were on the road from Birmingham to New Orleans, and this conversation was then coming to the ideation stage. And I remember asking you, Brooke, what would you want to read about in a magazine for people that love baking? And it's not just about the recipes.
Right.
It can't be recipes only, or else this is a waste of our time. And I guess I was driving because you wrote down on a notepad all of the ideas we were tossing about.
Okay, I have that. And it's actually in your handwriting.
I wrote it.
You wrote it. I was
cannot
driving.
believe I let you drive.
I was about to say, that's back when you did let me drive. But that is the brainstorm. And then we stopped, if I remember correctly, in Meridian, Mississippi.
Yeah.
We needed a coffee stop. And I think there was a McDonald's. We stopped and got coffee. And then that is when you posted the very first image in that parking lot to an Instagram account that you had just created on the fly.
I opened an Instagram account called The Bake Feed. And I knew we would want to fill that news feed with photos of what I assumed at the time would be all other people's baking, like going to a bakery, going to, anywhere that a pastry chef in a restaurant, sharing all these things in the baking world.
Right.
Because I think, I can look at this and tell you, just from our ideas alone, we knew we wanted this to celebrate the global baking community. And it was the title that we had. The very first title for the magazine was Bake, the Artisan Culture. So it was always culture, and
Right.
it was always about artisan baking. I even put an on sale date on here, late September, and that came true.
That held true.
And then when I look at the ideas that we put on here, this is so funny to read.
Some of them were in the first issue.
Expert Q&A, a topic specific, something, I guess, expert Q&A on something specific related to a thing. And in the first issue, it was chocolate chip cookies, I think. I can look. I have the first issue right here. Books that we loved. Show me, I said, so with contributed photos. So I guess show me what you're baking. And then one page, Bake for a Cause, knowing that there always had to be a philanthropic reason to support, or people that were baking to support philanthropic purposes. Bakery profile, which we still do to this day. Artisan product profiles, those come in and out of the magazine still. Baked item specific. So maybe
Having a hard time reading your own handwriting.
I can't read my own handwriting. And now that I'm in full progressives, I get to find where the glasses allow me to read it. A lot has happened in 10 years.
Okay, so do you remember what the first photo was that you posted on the Bake Feed that day?
It was a photo from Blue Dog Bakery in Louisville, Kentucky.
I remember that.
And they're still around today, and I'm so proud. I'll never forget when we went to Blue Dog Bakery, they were telling us about their creativity and their expansion, and they were opening Red Hog.
That's right.
So there's Blue Dog. Yeah, they have Blue Dog, and then they opened a charcuterie or savory, maybe a butcher shop called Red Hog.
Right. So fun.
Yeah, very proud that that was the first bakery that I remember feeling that's what I want to put in the first photo on the news feed of the Bake Feed.
And 10 years later, it's going strong.
Both of us, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so from the beginning, you wanted to celebrate the global baking community. Why has that mission always been important to you?
I think I look at my mom's story as an entrepreneur, and I remember people saying, you know, your mom is Southern Lady, the brand that she started from her passion. And not that this was ever a play for it to be, you are baked from scratch, but I remember Phyllis was a person with a story, and my mom wanted to tell the stories of other people that she shared a lot of common passion with. And for me, it was always about celebrating people, loving people, breaking down barriers between cultures that maybe historically have not loved or respected each other, and understanding that this world, I mean, even dare I say something like a chocolate chip cookie is not 100% purely from an American baking repertoire. There were influences that started hundreds of years ago, and those baking things meld into what we know today are things that are uniquely identified as the most American cookie or the most French pastry. But even those most French pastries have origins that go before them.
Right.
And I think it was a thread of people, flavors, places, and then making it at home. Because when I was a flight attendant, that's where I started really loving this quest. Was I'm traveling for my career in the airline industry, but I was visiting bakeries and cafes, and someone would say, oh, if you're in Puerto Vallarta, you have to have a concha at this bakery.
Right.
And I said, well, first let's start with what is a concha and why do I need it? And I'll never forget that being a flavor and an experience that was ingrained in my mind. I can still see where I was sitting, and how amazing it was. And I got home and wanted to recreate it. Now, the recreation attempt at the time was probably not as successful as you would see me bake today, but it was a part of that quest to then share it with my family and my friends and showcase this love that I had for the baking traditions I was discovering around the world. That's not to dismiss the years that I worked in a bakery here in Birmingham when I was in high school. But when you're in high school and you're working in a bakery, it was because I could eat buttercream from a 5-gallon container during the day.
That has not changed.
No, that hasn't changed. My friends worked there. I thought that the owners of the bakery were doing something one of a kind in Birmingham by having an artisan old world bakery with breads that I had never heard of before. And I remember learning what ciabatta was for the first time. Yes, I was bagging it up for people to purchase, but then I start thinking, I've never heard of this before. So that interest and that quest might have started truly then, but then when I had the opportunity to see the world during my airline career, that was when the fuel became overdrive for that learning.
Right. Okay, you're holding the very first issue that is an unbound copy of the magazine.
Again, talking about that journey of realizing what my mom had started and the aha moment that I was in her true footsteps by starting my own brand, I went to the printer to see the first issue come off press. So I flew to Louisville, Kentucky. Ironic that that's where Blue Dog Bakery is, but the printing company that we worked with at the time was a family owned and generational magazine printing facility, and they invited me to come. I was basically on standby in the hotel, ready for a 2 a.m. call. I didn't care. I said, when that first issue comes off press, I want to be there. But when magazines come off press, they then go to the bindery, which is where the glue is put in and all the pages are put together and they cut all the loose ends apart. But I wasn't going to wait for that. They cut for me that day with, it was hot paper and the smell of ink. I'll never forget it. And they handed me my very first copy of Baked from Scratch.
Hot off the press, literally.
And I still have it. This is it. And I keep it in my desk. I look at it a lot. I use it as a reminder of where we started. An inspiration for where we're going. And the principles that started this have never shifted. That's why it's hard to believe it's been 10 years, because I still tell people we're just getting started.
So quickly, though, after that first issue came off of press, we began getting phone calls from our newsstand consultants. What did they call and say?
Well, to take that back even further, my mom and my brother were a smidge skeptical that an artisan baking magazine with everything from scratch might not find its audience. But that's because they weren't the passionate scratch bakers like I am. And I knew there was a lot of us out there. I knew it. But in typical family business, we challenge each other, we encourage each other, but we also can be each other's worst skeptics, I think. And they said, okay, one issue. We'll put one issue on the newsstand and it'll be a test. And that's how we've done everything at Hoffman Media. All that to say it wasn't targeting just me, but we'll do a test. And so I said, okay, I'm going to give you my best in one test. So the magazine goes to the newsstand. The phone starts ringing off the hook. Our newsstand consultant said, you better be working on issue number 2 because this thing is selling like crazy.
And we hadn't been.
And we had not started working on issue number 2. We did that day.
We did.
It was the energetic burst of excitement, creative fulfillment. Even if one issue had been all we ever did, I would have been so proud to have said, I published the one and only issue of Bake from Scratch. But the world of bakers had other plans.
They did.
Yeah.
And a few months later, you traveled to New York City with your mom and your twin brother, Eric, for an award ceremony. Tell us about that special day.
Every year, there was an industry award ceremony for the hottest launches of the year. So magazines, believe it or not, you don't think about the magazine industry this way, but every year on average, there were 150 to 200 new magazines being introduced into the newsstand. And we had 3 magazines that we had launched in that year, all recognized in the top 30 launches. So
Incredible.
10%. We were 10%. And so I went with my mom and my brother, and then we got to the end of the ceremony and they announced the hottest launch of the year, and Bake from Scratch won.
I think I remember
a little ego moment with my mom and brother to be like, remember any skepticism?
Right. So let's talk about the evolution of Bake from Scratch. First, there was Instagram, which everyone might not know that existed first.
Yes.
Then there was a print magazine. Next came books, amazing partnerships with brands that you respect and still stock in your kitchen. We had the Crumb podcast, baking retreats, baking school, YouTube, so many things. We do like to say that we're just getting started. What do you think is next?
What do I think is next? I always say I'd love my own TV show.
I think that's manifested, right?
What I think is next is any further ways I can continue to connect and expand the knowledge about, again, people, culture, foods, but recipes and techniques, and share my passion for baking. The media world has changed so much in 10 years. The social media landscape has changed so much in 10 years. The digital distributions of content have changed so much in 10 years. And while sometimes we think we're constantly, I think, hanging on for dear life, I think of it like we're kicking out the walls and finding the next opportunity to connect with the global baking community.
Right.
I spend a lot of time traveling now, and that quest just continues to show me that even in a decade, we've barely skimmed the surface. And it's hard to say what's next other than something.
And a lot more.
And a lot more of it.
A lot more.
Absolutely.
So speaking of, you do travel around the world. You host about 15 baking retreats each year. But the very first one was a bread baking retreat in San Francisco. It was in May of 2019. How did you feel the moment that you realized 16 people showed up to a sold-out baking retreat?
I remember standing at the San Francisco Cooking School with you, and the glass windows that looked out onto the street and the beautiful kitchen, and I felt for a minute like an imposter. Like I had planned something, and oh no, they're gonna walk through the door and actually expect us to bake and have this retreat. And when it happened, I'll never forget seeing each and every person walk through the door and then turning the class over to Nicole Plew and everyone going through this incredible bread curriculum for that weekend. And then mentioning casually, well, we might do something else this year. I'm thinking about a retreat to Paris and then to Burgundy. What do you think? And before we left that weekend, half of that original 16 had basically thrown a deposit at us. I think we said, what, $500? I can't remember. Take it. I'll be there. I'm not missing this. And I think I started realizing another expansion had taken place.
And some of those same bakers still travel with us many times a year. It's incredible. So if you had to name your very favorite baking retreat that you've ever done, which one was it?
You're asking the impossible. I don't think there's a favorite.
What if I gave you two?
I don't want to pick
I'm negotiating now.
They're also different because some of them are so outside of the box that I think people would have a hard time believing that we did a baking retreat at a wilderness lodge in Alaska on Ketchikan Bay at the beautiful Tutka Bay Lodge and still saying, but what is the baking in Alaska? Why are you there?
Right.
And so I love that there was the element of something original, never before thought of. But Chef Kirsten and Mandy, both mother-daughter, again, family businesses, family passion, family culture. They believed in what we were doing. They are phenomenal chefs. They're phenomenal teachers. And I knew we would offer something so unique. And then to find yourself in Paris, France, the city that I fell in love with when I was in high school, to have people there that also were like, oh my goodness, I see why you love it here.
Right.
And to be at home in the kitchen at La Cuisine and an instant connection to Jane Birch and this family we now find ourselves, we are a part of the culinary family at La Cuisine. And they're our home when we're in Paris. So it's not that the first Paris retreat was my favorite retreat.
Right.
It's a favorite in my mind because of the connections we've made and how many times we take people through the kitchen there, but never repeating anything twice.
Right.
And so they're all my favorite.
Okay.
And then welcoming people to Birmingham here to our test kitchen, our Bake From Scratch headquarters, and the amazing chefs we work with here. Our test kitchen team, they pour their heart and their soul into the recipes that go into Bake From Scratch, and then they get to teach those to the bakers when they're here in Birmingham. And then for me to welcome people into our home, again, it's not travel for me, but it is travel because I have people here in Birmingham experiencing Bake From Scratch and our home city.
Absolutely. So you mentioned Alaska. You've done a photo shoot in Alaska for Bake From Scratch. You've also had photo shoots that have taken you to Sweden, to San Miguel in Mexico, so many places. Do you have a few photo shoots that stand out in your mind as being really incredible and unique?
Well, being in a helicopter and taken to the top of a mountain in Alaska with Mandy Dixon holding a basket of her pastries might be the most
unique,
outdoorsy thing I've ever done, but also one of the most unique locations I've ever been with a photographer. Stephanie Steele was with me. And we're standing there in the snow on the top of a mountain with Denali in the background. And I was so overwhelmed with emotion because I used to live in Alaska. It's a state that I called home. But then to be in this place that, I've never been before, on top of a mountain, photographing a baker who's so proud of her home state and culture, that was definitely an incredible experience. But then the same way I would say to be on the island of Capri and in an established cooking school, but tasting things with the most fresh lemon I've ever had. And to have discovered that on a trip with my husband. We were there for our anniversary. And I knew immediately, I'm bringing people back here. I'm bringing a
But it
photographer.
was happenstance.
Happenstance. I had not planned any culinary part of that vacation. Part of being married to me, I think there's that, oh, you must be always going to the bakeries and taking classes.
Right.
So sometimes I try to say, no, this trip's not going to involve that. It always involves that. But I had not planned for it. And then I was Googling, or actually I wasn't Googling. I was reading an article that I had been sent about visiting Capri, and it mentioned Michelangelo cooking classes with Gianluca and his wife Holly. And I sent an email randomly and I said, we just arrived on the island. We're here for our 10th wedding anniversary. It's tomorrow, actually. Is there any chance we can come and do a class? And Holly wrote back and said, Brian, you won't believe it, but the only day for this entire month and a half, maybe the whole season, that I have an availability is tomorrow, and we'll pick you up. And that class with them led to the feature we did in the January issue of 2025 along the Amalfi Coast and on the island of Capri, and then taking a baking retreat group there. So all that full circle, and then shooting YouTube videos.
Right.
That was my first Baker's Passport YouTube shoot, was travel show style. That was a moment of wow.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Lots of cameras everywhere, video, photography, capturing content, meeting the people, the families, the generations that have continued their family traditions. That stuff never leaves my mind.
So a new tentacle of Bake from Scratch began in 2020 during the height of the pandemic. Instagram baking videos, they truly saved us. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that. But they also saved many people in our baking community. And eventually they led to weekly baking school classes with Williams-Sonoma. Going on 5 years now, it's hard to believe. What was the first video that you filmed for Williams-Sonoma?
So, well, let's back up even further. The pandemic brought about
Banana bread.
banana bread and sourdough, right? As a highly extroverted person, that was such a difficult realization that we were not just in a 2-week flattening the curve and then we returned to full everyday life. And you being someone that I've spent almost 2 decades working alongside, you saw my emotions quickly. We had our COVID agreement that we would be in each other's pod of people. And so you saved me in a way by coming to my kitchen and spending time there because it was so lonely. But I told you one day the only way I was going to get through it was to bake. And why not do it on camera? For so long, people had said, Brian, why are you, of all people, not doing baking videos? I heard that so many times, and I never felt like I was able to look at a camera and connect. But then somehow it changed, and the pandemic brought that. And I'll never forget telling you to turn on or hold your cell phone camera and video me as I was going to make banana bread. And I said, we're going to do it for 5 days. And I chose 5 banana breads that I wanted to feature on Instagram. And I didn't know how to edit a video. All I knew how to do was post, well, I can't even remember, I guess, yeah, because it was Stir Together.
Right.
We posted one long run and people kept commenting, why are you not showing us what it looks like?
I was about to say, we didn't even show them the finished product.
Because we didn't know how to bake it and then show people. But ingredients were so scarce. Right. I mean, that was when the grocery stores were running out of everything. And so we didn't want to bake 2 things just to have a swap out in the video. So I made banana bread, put it in a pan and said, see ya, turned off the camera. And then I downloaded an app that I'm sure is just pitiful, but anyway, spliced some things together and we started doing baking videos every single day.
Right.
And it wasn't really for anyone out there in the baking world, it was for me. Mm-hmm. Because I could babble and talk and have this personality flying with you in the room. And then people started sending messages saying, you're something I look forward to every day.
Every day, yeah. Yeah.
And that's like such an impactful thing when someone says, I had happiness because of you. I turned on my Instagram every day knowing that while I was sad, I was going to see you smiling. Mm-hmm. And then I'm not crying now talking about it. But those moments led to what we now have today in this amazing community of people that continue to tune in and support our videos and our classes and things we do. One of the phone calls we had during that pandemic time was with Kristen Parakis at Williams-Sonoma. She said, can we get on the phone? I'm watching you bake every day, and Brian, you're just like lighting up the kitchen. And I said, yeah, we can get on the phone. And I said, what's up? And she said, so Williams-Sonoma is wanting to figure out where we enter into some of the video content for the pandemic programming that we're all flooding the internet with. And she said, we need some dog treats. And I know you have an adorable little dog, Emily. And she said, would you bake with your dog? And now that Emily's gone, it's such a moment that I remember. I'm so emotional talking about all this. But I got Emily in the kitchen and put her on a stool, and I made dog treats.
Paws were just like spreading out on the counter.
She was trying to go for the dough. She's just like her dad. She wanted the dough before it baked, but I didn't know if she could eat it, so I wouldn't let her do it. Anyway, I'd made that video, and Williams-Sonoma shared it on their social media. And then Kristen said, you mentioned on a call that you were going to teach some classes if people would tune in. Is there any chance you would do that in partnership with Williams-Sonoma? And she said, we'll send you stuff you need for your kitchen. I said, well, ask no more. And so we did that. And in October of 2020, we had our very first baking school class with Williams-Sonoma and Bake from Scratch. And there were thousands of people tuned in.
There were a lot of people.
I couldn't believe it. That's another moment in your career that you go, y'all are lying to me. You mean there's 20 people?
And we also thought that we were getting the bad night. Do you remember that Monday night?
Okay. Now I'm glad I have a glass of wine because you're going to make me talk. When Williams-Sonoma was announcing their lineup for virtual culinary events and what they were adding to their programming for their audience, we were slated in Monday night. And you know, as a kid and even as an adult, Mondays were never your day. School was back or work is back, and Monday was just Monday. That's why they say you have a case of the Mondays.
Right.
Well, I'd like to think we changed that case of the Mondays into something incredible, because what at first I thought was us being put in a non-primetime slot quickly turned into me realizing we were, again, a bright light for people on a Monday.
On a Monday.
So a case of the Mondays for us has become a case of a day that I look forward to so much. And almost 5 years now, we have been on the Zoom airwaves from, well, we're sitting in the video studio kitchen that did not exist the day we started baking school. And through that 5-year journey, to have watched me baking on a cart.
A rolling cart.
Listen, Booze Block knew that we were doing this. They sent this cart. I mean, again, the cart was a lifesaver. The cart was the beginning of the journey. But I was making bûche de Noël, pastries, cakes, all on this little cart, and the stand mixer would wobble that thing as the bread dough was kneading in the mixer, but it's what could work for the camera angles in my kitchen. Then I renovated my kitchen, and our kitchen designer invited us to her studio.
Right.
So there was a season of baking school for a year and a half, or well, almost 6 months maybe.
Yeah.
I can't remember the full timeline, but 6 months to a year, we were at Cindy Cantley's kitchen studio. And then I moved back home, and I was in my renovated kitchen where I had put in a marble island so that the camera could see everything, and my copper was behind me. But you think about the years of that being Monday night in my home, camera crew coming in, setting up, lights, my dogs having to leave, Steven not being able to come home. While it was amazing to be at home in my kitchen, it wasn't the best for every day and the ongoing journey we knew we were hoping to embark upon. So as we built out our new office space here in downtown Birmingham, I got to design my video studio kitchen. And you see now,
it's our Monday night home.
It's home. So this is home now, where we have an amazing, well, we have amazing equipment, but we have an amazing team. And the camera angles, over the years, we've added more cameras.
We've gotten sophisticated.
You can look around now. We've added camera angles. We've added capabilities.
Right.
And we have an incredible production team that keep keep us looking good. You know,
That's
I
right.
always say I'm only able to walk in and do what I can do, but it's all these amazing people around me that make it possible.
So our Monday night baking family, they truly are family. These are bakers that have been tuning in since that very first season. Mike Johnson was the very first guest, and it was a Halloween class, right?
Yes.
You've taught, of course, so many things to these bakers, but you've taught them one really important thing. There's a special chant in baking school. How does it go?
We love to do recipes that involve the step of folding. And before I talk about the chant, let's just hearken to a scene from Schitt's Creek where Moira and David Rose are in the kitchen and he is making, I guess, holiday mac and cheese. I think it was mac and cheese,
Yeah.
which I love mac and cheese, so also yay. But in that scene, he's reading, or she's reading the steps of her recipe to him, and she says, "Now fold in the cheese." And he said, "What does that mean?" And she said, "David, just fold in the cheese. I can't tell you everything." And he said, "But you can tell me something. This is your recipe." So then get into the actual baking world where recipes do require this delicate step of folding. And I'll never forget when I learned it at the Culinary Institute of America at Hyde Park in New York. I had been to do a story for the magazine of what it's like to take one of their pastry boot camps. And I was in my chef uniform and we are in the kitchen and our chef was like, "Now we're gonna fold these ingredients together." And I think in your mind, you think of one thing and then they show you the truth. And in that moment, he said, "The way I want you to remember it is like a clock. Take your spatula to the 12 o'clock position. You're going to move it through to the 6 o'clock position, and your other hand is going to give the bowl a quarter turn." That gives you this kind of repetitive motion. So as we get into baking school, that chant began with 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, give a quarter turn. And it got into this cadence where now that's what we do when we fold. And we chant it each and every time.
I love it.
Yeah.
So it was during a very special Mother's Day class, and your mom surprised you on camera in baking school with an apron that said 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, give a quarter turn.
So mom joined me for two Mother's Day classes over the years of the first 3 years of baking school. And the very first time she joined me was after my grandmother had passed away. And we were making, actually I take that back, my grandmother had not passed away, but she had always told me, "I wish you knew about this recipe I used to make for a black bottom pie." And I said, "Well, Mimi, just give me the recipe. I'd love to make it." She said, "I don't know where that recipe is, and let me tell you something about that recipe. You're going to use every bowl in your kitchen." And so we did get her recipe. I think Aunt Janice or my mom found it. And we took that recipe, obviously created it into a bake from scratch version of the recipe so that we had all the right steps. You know, grandmother's recipes, the note card says bake.
Right.
So we had to figure out what that bake meant. So anyway, we recreated my grandmother's black bottom pie recipe, and my grandmother tuned in every Monday night.
She did.
And my mom joined me, and we made her mom's recipe for Mother's Day. And then my grandmother passed away later that year. And so then the next year, my mom joined me in the kitchen here, where we recreated one of her recipes that she had a memory of from childhood, a cherry pecan cake from the Pizzitz Bakery here in Birmingham, Alabama. And my mom talked about that cake so much that I knew that if I did not figure out how to have this recipe recreated, it would be something that I longed for,
Right.
wondering what it was my mom had as a kid that she loved so much.
Right.
So we started the process of research in the area. What are we going to do to discover where this long gone bakery recipe went? And we asked my mom questions. We asked people in Birmingham questions that had known the cake. And we reverse engineered through memory a recipe that was Mama BFS approved. We had my mom in the test kitchen. She was there for every tasting. And when it landed, she said, "This is it. This is the cake. It's so good." So for that Mother's Day class, Mom came to the kitchen here with me, and we made the cherry pecan cake in baking school. I was able to share that with her. And I didn't know that was her last Mother's Day. Mm-hmm. And she spent it with me in the kitchen. And in that class, she presented me with an apron that she had designed with Tracy Wood Franklin here on our amazing graphic design team here at Hoffman Media. And they surprised me. I had no clue. I will never forget my mom getting this brown bag out, and she said, but before we get started, there's something you need to put on. And she had that apron made for me. So a very, very fond memory from my last Mother's Day with my mom. So I spent my Mimi's last Mother's Day with my mom with one of her recipes, and then the next year it was with my mom.
And everybody in our baking family loved Mama BFS. She tuned in every week just like your Mimi did.
Yes.
And
yes.
she was always chatting with people.
And she called my phone 10 seconds flat after the end of each class. I couldn't even talk to the crew to like recap anything. My phone was ringing and it was my mom. I was going to answer that phone because she was either going to tell me something I needed to work on, and it was always, you take too big of a bite. You can't talk after you do that. But all of that started because the very first time I was on Home and Family on the Hallmark Channel, it was my first national television appearance. I was so excited. I made these apricot sweet buns. I said apricot and apricot during the segment, so you do you and you say what you need to say, and I said both. But I took such a big bite of that pastry, and being a little stage fraught, is that the word? Stage fright. I had some nerves kicking. It was like putting a cotton ball in your mouth and chewing. I could not swallow it to save my life. They did not have any water or wine for me sitting right there. I had to work so hard to swallow it, and they started asking me questions, and I just put my hand up. I was like,
1 minute,
like
please.
Affirming it with thumbs up and stuff. And so my mom, ever since then, anytime she watched me do a class or an appearance on a TV show, she said, you took such a big bite. I said, but you gave me such a big mouth. I didn't know how small the bite should be.
That's good mom feedback.
Every class that would, and then she'd of course call and tell me how much she loved it.
Right.
Very proud mom.
Right. She was. She still is.
Yes.
Before you ever thought about teaching baking classes, you taught new hire flight attendants for Alaska Airlines. What did that career teach you about your current career?
First of all, when I was teaching flight attendants, I had no clue that you would say I was teaching.
Right.
The word teach never really got into my mind. I loved being a flight attendant. So I've always clearly been a very emotive and excited person. And it was a dream career. And so when I had the opportunity to go into the training department at Alaska Airlines, I thought I was just getting to amplify this love I have for travel and for the airline industry and for being a flight attendant at Alaska. And so I loved that career. I just did not realize it was a building block of a teaching platform or the ability to teach. And it taught me so much about what I get to do today, each and every day. I had an amazing team of mentors and supervisors in that world. Matthew Coder was my direct supervisor. Lucy Aberderis was one of the training instructors that I had an instant connection with. And they mentored me and helped grow me into the person that I think I still hopefully shine from the lessons they taught me. There was feedback. This mouth runs a lot. I wasn't great at keeping the class to the segmented time allotted. I know you're all shocked.
Goodness.
So I learned from them though. And my mom's intent all along was to never hire my brother or me to work in her company until we had learned and been taught by other people. And I had an amazing team in that Alaska Airlines family that prepared me, or at least whatever it was, for what I get to do today.
Right. I love that. What is your personal baking style, to shift a little bit to baking, and how is it reflected in the magazine?
My baking style is whatever I want to make. Just kidding.
I fully support that.
No, I always say my favorite thing to bake is the next thing I've never made before because I love the quest. I love the learning. I love the adventure. Now, there are things I repeat a lot. I used to say I didn't, but now as the years go on, there are things that have become a part of my baking repertoire. If you ask me what I'm going to make over the course of a weekend, there's probably going to be a yeasted bread involved. I absolutely love it. Milk bread takes the top spot on that, or a big fat yeast roll. We know that too. But also time-consuming things. I love the art of getting lost in the kitchen. So lamination, making pastries, cakes, banana bread. I will never tire of banana bread. That might be my first love in the kitchen. Yeah. So I bake things that bring me comfort. Now that I don't have my mom and my grandmother, I make things that they loved because I feel like I get moments with them in the kitchen. So it's changed. My baking style and journey has changed over more than the 10 years. I've been baking longer than that, but in the professional sense of bake from scratch, that has been something that evolves.
Okay.
I used to do FOMO Friday with Erin Clarkson. She always said stuff about FOMO baking. And so I said, well, let's do FOMO Friday. So we started this baking thing where we would post on Fridays and I guess tell people they had FOMO. Yeah. But once they had a recipe, they could make it.
Right. What is one baking tool you recommend every baker have in their kitchen?
Wow.
I know what I want you to say, but that's a hard one.
One tool.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I love my spatulas.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm obsessed with my spatula collection. Looks probably like my personality and mood swings. Lots of them. Of course, you say stand mixer, but you think about baking origins. Most recipes, lots of recipes were made by hand. You go back hundreds of years, there weren't stand mixers in the kitchens. These are convenience items. I don't know. What am I supposed to say that's on your mind?
I was going to say a scale because you've done such a great job teaching people to use a scale.
The scale is, I think it is what enhances your baking ability. I know people have baked for generations without, again, talking about a mixer and technology. What I would say today, the moment that changed my journey with having intimidation from recipes, that one day it worked really well, one day that it didn't, and why? What? Then I realized I didn't scoop the flour properly. I didn't have the right weight. And the weight changed everything. And again, that came about by traveling abroad and baking abroad. I started learning baking techniques and lessons while traveling. Recipes are created in weight. It doesn't matter how many cups of something. If you know you need 250 grams of it, use 250 grams of it, and you're going to have the same amount the person that created the recipe had. And the weight, the successes started happening a lot more frequently.
And that's the international love language of bakers.
Well, yes, it's international language, whether it's filled with love or not.
Definitely some love.
Lots of love for the scale.
Fighting hunger has always been an important cause to your heart. How have you supported organizations, and No Kid Hungry in particular, over the years? I
realized early in my culinary career that I had a very hard time being in what I call the glitz and glamour of it without understanding that there's another side of it that's not beautiful. And that's people that find themselves in food insecure homes, children in particular, that do not have the ability to go out and change that because they're children. They need to be in school. They need to be learning. Well, you can't learn if you don't have proper nourishment.
Right.
And you and I both served for many years on the board of the food bank here in Birmingham. And that experience opened my world. And then to translate that into my baking career here at Bake From Scratch, we did a feature years ago on No Kid Hungry and their bake sale campaign. They activated bakers. We can bake the world a better place by taking our passion for baking, host a bake sale, and donate that money to No Kid Hungry. Then the sweet part of life is benefiting people that just need nourishment and food.
Right.
And for me to have become a partner in what they call hunger fighters, I'm a hunger fighter. I want to see the day that no one is hungry.
Right.
We are in such a beautifully rich world that everyone should have food.
Right.
And over the years, I've had the opportunity to partner with No Kid Hungry. in particular, a pretty egotistical boost is being invited to be a part of the Williams-Sonoma and No Kid Hungry campaign, where I was asked to design a spatula.
Right.
And that spatula had croissants on it, because I'll never forget where I was when the phone call came. And I was in a French destination, and I had just bought a basket of pastries that morning, and there were croissants sitting near me when I got the phone call. So I knew croissants had to make their way onto the spatula. And to have been invited now for the second time to be a part of that campaign is a true honor. And I hope it's just the tip of the iceberg for me, because I want to always make sure that if I am in this beautiful, delicious world of baking, that I am also serving a community of people that we can end hunger together. We can do it.
Right, absolutely. So we've worked together for 18 years now.
Woo! Let me pick up a glass of wine.
Let him get the wine. I might need some too. I love when I hear news stories, and I've heard a lot over and over again throughout the years, but I love when I hear news stories. And just the other day, you shared a story that I had never heard of with myself and some fellow bakers. And I want you to tell everybody about this wedding cake that you made as a child.
Oh, man. Well, I don't know how much I can take credit for saying I made the cake, but here's a photo of my twin brother Eric and our Aunt Cheryl and me behind a 3-tiered wedding cake. And it was no one's wedding. It was Aunt Cheryl's birthday. And my mom and Aunt Cheryl shared such a special bond. And Aunt Cheryl loves her birthday as much as I love mine. And so every August, Mom and Eric and me, I don't know how much Eric truly stayed engaged with it, but we would make a birthday cake for her. And one year, Mom had bought this plastic columned wedding cake stacking stand, and we made Aunt Cheryl a 3-tiered wedding cake for her birthday. And every year our quest was bigger than the next.
Bigger.
We had years of making the brightest purple icing you've ever seen, because that's Aunt Cheryl's signature color. This year it was wedding cake style, tons of icing. Aunt Cheryl and I, there's no reason for each piece to have different amounts of icing. Just have the icing on all the pieces. Well, this cake was nothing but roses, icing, and maybe the thinnest little cake you've ever seen.
And I think there's a pink swan too.
Oh yeah, there's a pink swan in the middle.
Was that part of the kit or the...
I'm sure that when I was at the store where they sold like the wedding stuff, I picked out a pink swan and Mom filled it with roses. So we made this cake. I didn't remember this cake until I went through my mom's photos and found it. So stories come back to you, and I remember it now. But that memory, I always knew we made Aunt Cheryl's birthday cakes big and bold and bright,
Right.
but this one...
Took the cake.
You take the cake by having it in here to hand it to me.
Okay, let's do some rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, chocolate or vanilla?
Vanilla.
Biscuits or scones?
Biscuits.
Soft or crispy cookies?
What do you think? Soft all the way, team medium rare.
Salted or unsalted butter?
Unsalted. We can salt what we want to.
What's your go-to road trip snack?
Oatmeal cream pie.
Oh, so good. Maybe a Diet Coke too?
Oh, now, yeah. Diet Coke is the perfect accompaniment.
What's a dessert you always order if you see it on the menu?
Il flottant.
Good answer. What is your typical French bakery order?
I love a Viennois chocolat. I love a pain suisse. I'll get a pan au raisin for my husband or you or Uncle Lane, but that's not my pick. And God, a good old croissant.
Okay. Do you like to hand knead or use a stand mixer?
Hand knead.
Okay, this question is for your Uncle Lane, but I want to know your answer. Do you clean as you go, or do you wait until the baking's complete?
I wait until the baking is complete. And that used to be the hardest part of baking. You know, grandma, my Mimi telling me, you're going to use every bowl in the kitchen. There was a dread of dirty dishes. And so you'd make this huge mess, and then something's in the oven, and then you're like, what in the world? But I somehow taught myself, I remember saying, if you hate it the whole time, you're going to quit doing it. And so then I started enjoying washing dishes. I hand wash everything. All of my baking equipment is hand washed. I have a lot of antique French bowls and things that I buy when I'm traveling. And of course I want to use them.
Right.
So I get them in the kitchen, I use them, but I hand wash everything, including my brand new bakeware from Williams-Sonoma. I'm always going to hand wash, keeps it the best quality. And I started thinking about it the same way I do cleaning up after a dinner party, where I say these are memoirs of a messy table. I think about the baking and the memoirs of that moment. What did I do? What did I learn? And what do I smell in the oven? And so I clean my dishes after I'm finished baking Uncle Lane. My uncle will wash a dish at each step along the way, which we've had to work with him on because the outcome is not what he wants when he's getting more worried about the dishes than he is what's in the stand mixer. So I've hopefully helped fix that.
That was not a quick answer. I knew I couldn't keep you to that.
Yeah.
Okay, what's your baking playlist vibe?
Oh, man. Well, it's somewhere between a little ouncy lounge and like French cafe music.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a fun mix.
The mood swings, and then maybe the Emily in Paris soundtrack if I just need a little bit of a beat.
I like it. What's your birthday cake of choice?
Hummingbird cake and banana cake with chocolate buttercream and Apple Jack's poke cake and lots of birthday cake.
And when you celebrate your birthday for an entire month,
there's plenty of it.
You can have lots.
Yeah.
Okay, if you had to sum up your baking philosophy in one word, what would it be?
Bake it your own.
I love it.
That's more than one
That's
word.
more than one, but that's a really good philosophy.
That's my baking philosophy. I remember years ago feeling the constraints and confinement of baking. People say, I cook, I don't bake. Because they cook and they do this and this and a smidge of this and add this and whatever. Baking felt like follow the thing and you can't do anything on your own. But after I started learning, yes, there are rules. And yes, there are things you have to follow to a precise way. But there's always room to bake it your own. And the freedom brought about such creativity that I want people to bake it their own. So much so that, Brooke, when I was flipping through this very first issue of the magazine, and I saw my very first letter from the editor to everyone in the world, introducing myself to them as a baker, you see these words, big and bold at the top, I bake, I don't cook.
Right.
And that was my answer to the world of people that say, I cook, I don't bake. And so now I do cook more. That's happened in the 10 years. But I wanted that freedom for bakers to know they can bake it their own. And then that starts to make the process feel a little bit more fun.
Okay. I think that's a perfect ending. Bake it your own.
Cheers to 10 years.
Cheers to 10 years and so much more. We're just getting
started.
I can't wait for another sit down. There's a lot more we need to talk about.
Are we going to wait till you're 20?
No, we can't wait that long.